She cheated on me with my best friend and stole $250, $0 from my late father's estate, then mysteriously came back claiming she's the rightful owner of our family house. Now I'm fighting in court to prove I'm the sole heir. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be the biggest liar and cheat I've ever known. Honestly, I thought we had a good thing going, two professionals, no kids, a nice house, and a future I thought was secure. But that illusion shattered in a matter of days when I stumbled across something that made my blood boil and my stomach drop. It all started with small, weird signs. Her phone suddenly password protected, her being busy all the time, and her canceling plans at the last minute, which I chalked up to work stress or some girl stuff. But then I found out the truth, and it was way worse than I could have imagined. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, and I was cleaning out the desk drawer in our bedroom, something I do occasionally to declutter. I wasn't expecting to find anything, but I figured I'd just tidy up and put things in order. That's when I saw the envelope tucked behind some old receipts. It was a plain, unassuming envelope with my name on it, and I didn't think much of it at first. I opened it, and inside was a stack of photos of Lisa with my best friend, Mark, in a hotel room, kissing and touching each other. The photos weren't blurry and they weren't taken from far away. They were clear as day, and they showed them clearly in the act. My stomach clenched tight. I couldn't breathe for a second. I stared at those photos, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I quickly looked through her phone, which she always kept locked. I'd never thought I'd do that, but something about her recent behavior just didn't sit right. I found messages, long, explicit texts between her and Mark, talking about how much they wanted each other, how they couldn't keep their hands off. There were even plans to meet up again to spice things up, as she put it. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How long had I been blind? The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical, sexual, and it involved my best friend. It felt like my world was collapsing. And then there was the money. That's another layer I uncovered later, but I'll get to that. For now, I was just trying to process the fact that my wife, the woman I trusted, had been cheating on me with Mark. And not just cheating, but lying, sneaking around, hiding everything. I felt so stupid for not noticing the signs sooner, but at the same time I was furious that she'd lied to my face for so long. I thought we had a solid marriage, but apparently I was just fooling myself. I remember sitting there, staring at the photos and messages, feeling my hands shake. My mind kept circling back to the moments when she'd lied about where she was, why she was late. The little things I brushed off as work stress or her being tired suddenly looked like lies. I didn't sleep that night, and I knew I had to confront her. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't unsee what I'd found. I knew I had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And that's when everything changed. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. I knew I had to confront her. There was no way I could keep pretending everything was fine, not after what I'd seen. I decided I'd do it calmly, but deep down, I knew that calmness wouldn't last long. When Lisa got up, I was already sitting in the living room, waiting for her. She looked surprised to see me awake so early, but her face quickly shifted into that familiar bitchy smirk she always wore when she was trying to hide something. "Hey," she said, walking in and sitting across from me. "What's going on?" I looked at her, my voice steady but cold. "I found your damn secret, the photos, the messages, everything. Tell me what the hell is going on, Lisa." She blinked, trying to act innocent. "What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean." "No, don't play dumb," I snapped. "I saw the photos of you with Mark in that hotel room. I saw the messages where you talk about how much you want each other. How long has this been going on?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, then she rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting. It's just sex, okay? It doesn't mean anything. Mark's just a friend and we were bored. It's not a big deal." I clenched my fists. "Not a big deal. You've been lying to me for months, hiding this from me, and you expect me to believe it's just sex and boredom. Do you hear yourself? You're cheating on me with my best friend and you're trying to brush it off like it's nothing." She huffed and crossed her arms. "Look, I didn't plan for this to happen. Mark, been there for me, okay? I was lonely and he made me feel alive again. That doesn't mean I don't love you, it's just a mistake. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A mistake. That's what she called betraying me with my best friend. I felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. I'd always thought Lisa was the woman I'd spend my life with, and now I was questioning everything. I asked her why she did it, and she just shrugged, saying she needed something different and that I'd been distant lately. Bullshit. That was just her way of trying to justify her betrayal. I knew I had to keep my composure, but inside I was boiling. I told her I wanted her to leave, that I couldn't be with someone who lied and cheated like that. She started crying, playing the victim, saying I was overreacting, that I was crazy for accusing her without proof. But I had the proof, those photos, those messages. It was all there, plain as day. Still, her tears made me feel sick, like I'd been punched again, this time in my gut. That whole day, I couldn't focus. I kept replaying everything I'd found, trying to understand how I missed all the signs. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry at myself for trusting her so completely. It was like my whole life had been a lie. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, so naive. I'd always been the one to work hard, to provide, to be loyal, and now I was left with nothing but a shattered image of the woman I loved and a best friend I thought I knew. Later, I started noticing more strange things: missing money from our joint account, sudden transfers that didn't make sense, and her acting paranoid whenever I asked about our finances. That's when I realized she had been stealing from my late father's estate, draining about $250, $0. It was a blow I never saw coming. I'd been working on sorting out the estate, and I found out she'd been siphoning money for months, maybe longer. That was the cherry on top. Not only was she cheating, but she was also stealing from what was left of my family's inheritance. I felt like I'd been punched again, only this time I was on the ground, bleeding. I couldn't believe she'd do that. She was supposed to be my wife, my partner. Instead, she turned out to be a lying, thieving bitch. I knew I couldn't just ignore everything anymore. I had to start planning my next move, how to deal with her, how to confront Mark, and how to protect what was left of my family's estate. I was furious, but I also knew I had to stay sharp. This was just the beginning of a long, ugly fight. The days that followed were a blur of rage, confusion, and cold calculation. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos, that look in her eyes when she lied to my face, and the thought of Mark, my supposed best friend, smiling at me like he hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible. The shock was slowly turning into a kind of cold, determined fury. I knew I had to act, not just for myself, but to protect what little was left of my family's legacy. First thing I did was get a private investigator. I needed to confirm everything about the money, and I also wanted to gather proof of her ongoing affair and her theft. I hired someone discreet, and within a few days, he came back with detailed reports. It turned out she transferred large sums of money into her own accounts, and there was evidence she'd been funneling money out of the estate for months, probably even before I found those initial photos. The amount stolen, 250, was confirmed. I felt sick again, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Meanwhile, I started looking into the legal side of things. My father's estate was supposed to be divided among his children, me and my sister, per his will. But now Lisa was claiming she was the rightful owner of our family house. She'd somehow managed to get a court order claiming she was the sole heir, based on some fabricated documents and false claims about our father's intentions. I knew I had to fight back, and I had to do it fast. If I didn't, she'd take everything: our house, the money, everything that belonged to my family. The thing that infuriated me most was her lies. She kept insisting she was the true owner, that she'd been wronged, and that I was just trying to ruin her. She'd even gone so far as to accuse me of abusing her, trying to turn everyone against me. I knew she was good at lying, but I also knew I had to expose her for what she really was. So I dug through old legal papers, looked into her background, and hired a lawyer who specialized in estate disputes. We started building a case against her, proving her theft, her affair, and her fraudulent claims to the house. Meanwhile, her behavior grew more erratic. She'd show up at the house unannounced, trying to intimidate me, yelling that I was jealous and paranoid, twisting everything to make herself look innocent. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I had concrete proof, and I was ready to fight. I also kept a close watch on her financial transactions, making sure she wasn't trying to drain any more money or tamper with the estate. One day, she showed up at my office, trying her usual manipulative act. She burst into tears, claiming she was the victim, that I'd ruined her life, and that I was trying to take everything from her. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her she'd gone too far, that I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this, not anymore. I handed her a copy of the evidence I'd gathered, proof of her affair, her theft, and her fraudulent claims. Her face went pale, and for the first time I saw a crack in her facade. That moment was a turning point. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine and for my peace of mind. I started the legal process to challenge her claim on the house, and I filed for an emergency injunction to freeze her accounts and prevent her from moving any more money out of the estate. The stakes were high, and I knew this was going to be a long, ugly battle. But I also knew I couldn't let her destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. My father's legacy was at stake, and I was determined to see justice done. I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I was finally taking control, and dread because I knew the coming days would be filled with more lies, more manipulation, and probably more surprises. But I was done being the victim. I was ready to fight back, no matter what it took. I'd been betrayed in every way possible, by my wife, by my best friend, and even by the system that I thought was supposed to protect me. Now I was the one fighting to reclaim what was mine, and I wasn't going to stop until I succeeded. The court date came sooner than I expected, and I wasn't prepared for how intense it would be. I had gathered all the evidence I could, bank statements, the photos, the text messages, and the reports from the private investigator. My lawyer warned me that Lisa would pull every trick in the book to spin her story, to make herself look innocent and me look like the villain. I knew she was good at lying, but I was confident that the truth was on my side. Still, seeing her in that courtroom, smug and dismissive, made my blood boil. Lisa sat there, acting fragile, wiping tears from her eyes, claiming I was controlling and paranoid. She painted herself as the victim, saying she'd only been confused and lonely, and that her affair with Mark was just a mistake. She insisted the money she took was for our future, that she'd only wanted to help me and that I was just trying to ruin her. Her voice was shaky, but her eyes sparkled with that manipulative glint she always had when she was lying through her teeth. My lawyer presented the evidence, showing the transfers of money, the fraudulent documents, and the proof of her affair. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, scrutinizing every detail. I could see Lisa's facade slipping when confronted with the facts. Her excuses became more desperate and her tone more defensive. She claimed she was misunderstood, that she'd never meant to hurt me, that she just wanted to be loved. But the court wasn't buying it. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. I took the stand. I told the court everything, how I found the photos, the messages, her theft, and how she'd been lying to me for months. I explained how her betrayal shattered my trust, how her stealing from my father's estate was a breach of everything we stood for. I saw her staring at me with that bitchy smirk, trying to undermine me, but I stayed firm. I knew this was about justice, not just revenge. The judge finally made her ruling. She granted the emergency injunction, freezing Lisa's accounts and halting her claim to the house. She also ordered an audit of the estate and called for a full hearing to determine the rightful heir. I felt a wave of relief, but I knew this was just the beginning. Lisa's response was furious. She yelled, tried to attack my credibility, and accused me of harassing her, but her words rang hollow. I had the evidence and I had the law on my side. After the court session, Lisa stormed out, screaming that I was ruining her life and that she'd fight to the bitter end. I stayed behind, exhausted but relieved that I'd taken a huge step forward. I knew she wasn't done, though. She'd never accept losing, and I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. I also started working more closely with the estate lawyers, preparing for the long legal battle ahead. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity and to stop her from destroying what was left of my family's legacy. In the days that followed, I kept reflecting on everything I'd learned. Trust is fragile, I realized, and betrayal cuts deeper than I ever imagined. I had loved Lisa, believed in her, and thought she loved me in return. But now I saw her for what she really was, a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. It hurt to admit that, but it was also a kind of liberation. I was finally taking control of my life again. Even if it meant facing a future full of legal battles and heartbreak. I knew I'd never forget what she did, but I also knew I had to move forward for my own sake. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything I'd worked for. The legal fight dragged on longer than I expected, but I stayed focused. Every day, I was dealing with lawyers, court documents, and new revelations that kept surfacing. Lisa, of course, refused to admit defeat. She was still trying to manipulate the situation, claiming she was the rightful owner of the house, that I was just a jealous husband trying to ruin her. She even hired her own lawyer, trying to find loopholes and ways to get around the court's orders. But I had the evidence, and I had the law on my side. Still, her persistence was draining. I'd never seen anyone so determined to destroy everything, even if it meant lying, cheating, and manipulating her way through the system. One day, I got a call from my lawyer with some shocking news. Lisa had filed a counterclaim, claiming she'd been wronged, and that she deserved the estate because she was the one who truly loved my father. She even submitted some forged documents trying to prove she was the heir. I was furious. How far would she go? I knew I had to dig deeper, find more proof, and expose her lies once and for all. I hired a forensic document examiner, and within days they confirmed the documents she submitted were fake. Her entire claim was built on a lie. That was the turning point. I realized I couldn't just sit back and wait for the court to decide. I had to fight smarter. I decided to dig into her background even further, hiring a private investigator to look into her past. What I found was disturbing. Turns out she'd lied on her job applications, had a few shady financial dealings, and even a history of manipulating people for personal gain. It all made sense now. She'd been planning this scheme for a while, using her charm and lies to steal money and control everything around her. My disgust grew, but so did my resolve. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild my life outside the chaos. I found a new place to stay, away from her toxic influence. I cut ties with friends who still supported her, realizing they didn't see the full picture. I also started therapy, something I'd never considered before but desperately needed. The betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, they'd all taken a toll. Talking to someone helped me process the pain and focus on what I needed to do next. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the memory of my father and what he'd left me. One evening, I sat in my new apartment, going over everything I'd collected. The evidence was mounting, and I could see the case against Lisa coming together. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. Hope that this nightmare would end soon and I could finally move on. But also exhaustion. This fight had drained every ounce of energy I had. I'd been betrayed on every level, but I refused to let her win. I owed it to myself, to my father's memory, and to the truth to see this through. The final court hearing was scheduled for next month, and I knew that would be the day everything would come to a head. I was ready for it. I'd come too far to back down now. Day of the final court hearing arrived, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I sat in that courtroom. All the months of pain, betrayal, sleepless nights, and relentless fighting had led to this moment. I had everything lined up: proof of her affair, the stolen money, the forged documents, and the evidence from the private investigator. Lisa, looking pale and desperate, sat at the other table, trying her best to look composed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She knew she was cornered, and that made her even more dangerous. When my lawyer stood up to present our case, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. I listened as the documents and evidence were laid out clearly, step by step. I saw the judge's eyes flick over the proof, her brow furrowing as she took it all in. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue her innocence, but it was obvious they had no leg to stand on. The forged documents, the bank transfers, the testimony from the private investigator, all of it painted a damning picture. Finally, the judge spoke. She ruled in my favor on every major point. She declared that Lisa had committed fraud, theft, and breach of her marriage vows. She invalidated her claim to the house, reaffirmed my status as the rightful heir, and ordered the immediate return of the stolen estate funds. She also issued a restraining order against Lisa, barring her from entering the property or contacting me further. The courtroom erupted into a tense silence, broken only by the judge's final words: "Justice has been served." As I stepped out of the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of closure. The months of chaos, the betrayal, the heartbreak, finally it was over. I had fought for what was mine, for my dignity, and for the memory of my father. I knew Lisa wouldn't just accept defeat quietly, but I was done playing her game. I had won the legal battle, but more importantly, I had regained my sense of self. In the days that followed, I moved into a new place, started rebuilding my life, and focused on healing. The trust I once had in love and partnership was shattered, but I refused to let it define me. I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those closest to us, and that the only way to survive is to stand strong and fight for what's right. I also realized I'd grown stronger than I thought possible, ready to face whatever life threw at me, without lies and deception clouding my path. Looking back, I see how much I've learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep, but resilience is stronger. I still carry the scars, but I no longer carry the weight of her lies. I've reclaimed my peace, my integrity, and most importantly, my hope for a future where honesty and loyalty still matter. Sometimes, you have to lose everything just to find out who you really are. And for me, that's a survivor.